For many, many years of my life, I set New Year's resolution goals. This was things I wanted to accomplish and the kind of person I wanted to become. Every single year, without fail, I would fail those New Year's resolutions. To see if I was the only person having this problem, I put a quick poll up on YouTube, and would you look at the results? Many people didn't even remember what their New Year's resolutions were last year, let alone actually take them to completion. So in this video, I want to share with you why I don't think you should be setting New Year's resolutions and what's been working for me instead. So instead of setting New Year's resolutions, I'm going to outline exactly what you should be doing instead of that, which from my experience has, increased the likelihood that I actually make change. I actually improve my life. I become the kind of person that I'm proud of, and I feel like I'm not wasting my potential. And all of this came about when I saw a video from Thomas Frank. It's an absolutely great video. I'll put the link in the description. I highly recommend you go out and check out his whole channel. His production quality is insane, but that video in and of itself is really good. And he explains about how you can stick with New Year's resolutions. And the very first point he talks about is how many people think that their future self is going to be in a different state to who they are now. They think, next year or at the start of 2020, I'm going to be able to go to the gym, I'm going to be able to eat healthily, I'm going to be able to do all of these different New Year's resolutions. And they think that because it's the start of the year, they're going to be able to stick with them. And the reason they do that is because when you think of yourself in the future, you don't view that as yourself. You actually view that as somebody else. I'm going to link 2 scientific studies in the description below that prove that when you think about future you, your brain actually activates and thinks that it's thinking about somebody else. But here's the problem with that. As Thomas Frank says, as you go into the new year, especially when it's the new decade, you have this intense feeling of motivation. It feels like there's a fresh start. It feels like your past is a blank slate and you've got this new future ahead of you where you can define yourself as in new future. And this motivation's good and you should definitely tap in and harness it. But what happens is after a couple months, this motivation dies. And I've personally been in the gym all year round and you literally see a surge of people in January. And then there's a lot less people in December. This is just facts. This genuinely happens. That motivation you get at the start of the year always dies out. But here's the thing. Right now, before the new year hits, we don't have motivation. And as I've just said, 3 months into the new year, we won't have motivation. So if you're not willing to start going to the gym or start creating the new habits you want to now, when you don't have motivation, when the motivation dies from the new year, you're going to be in the same place that you are now. Therefore, if you're not willing to start the habits now, when the motivation dies, those habits are going to fall off. Now that Thomas Frank video was a great video and he went on to explain 3 more points about how you can increase the likelihood that you stick with your New Year's resolutions. And again, there's a link to that in the description. And another video I saw on the topic of New Year's resolutions was by a channel called Veritasium. And again, I'll link that video down in the description and I recommend you check it out. The main point he had to make was that when it comes to change, people tend to expect change to be this enormous life-changing shift, some overnight success. And we see this in the book titles and in the seminars by Tony Robbins where it's like, today is the day that everything's going to change. And Veritasium goes on to explain how this is an unreasonable expectation. Instead of expecting everything to change overnight, instead we should focus on tiny habits, because those tiny habits will compound over and over and over. If you just improve yourself by 1% every single day, by the end of the year you're going to improve yourself by a massive amount. And you referenced a book called Atomic Habits, which is written by James Clear. And that's the book where he showed a diagram, which I'll show up on screen now, where if you make tiny changes, those changes compound over a long period of time. And again, this is great advice by Veritasium. I'll put a link to his video down below in the description. And I was so glad when he mentioned the book Atomic Habits, because that was the book that taught me why I shouldn't set New Year's resolutions and what I should do instead. Just a disclaimer here, I'm not saying this way is better, I'm just saying this is the way that worked for me. So if you've tried New Year's resolutions and it's failed, then I would suggest you try this instead. So what I'm going to do for the remainder of this video is detail what you should do instead of setting New Year's resolutions. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to give you a full framework which is going to allow you to implement this idea straight away into your life. So there are 3 layers of behavior change. The first one is outcome. This is saying I want to lose this much weight by the end of the year. This is saying I want to have 1 million subscribers by the end of 2020. That's the first layer of behavior change, that outcome. The second thing is the systems level of behavior change. This is saying, I know that I can't control those outcomes. I can't control the amount of subscribers I get by the end of 2020. Just like you don't have direct control over the amount of weight that you lose. If you did, you could snap your fingers and lose that weight just in a snap. Instead, you do have control over the systems that you implement in getting you towards those goals. For example, instead of setting my goal to be getting 1 million subscribers by the end of 2020, I could set my goal to be to upload 3 videos a week, high quality videos every single week, and, promote them on my email list and all of that stuff. It's just a random example. And that is something I can control, and therefore, if I focus on what I can control, I'm far more likely to stick with the process instead of focusing on that end goal. Just like if your end goal is to lose a certain amount of weight by the end of the year, it's far better to say, no, I'm going to go to the gym multiple times every week throughout that year. Now, Veritasium actually went on to say that instead of saying I'm going to go to the gym 5 times a week for the rest of the year, you should start small, and I tend to agree with him here. But the point being, this is the second level of behavior change, which is the systems level. But this third level of behavior change is something that not many personal development channels talk about, but it's one that when I really focused in on, learned it, and then went through the framework, which I'm about to show you later, I really started to notice a change in who I was. I started to become proud of who I am. I started to be able to use my time the way I wanted to and feel in control of my life a lot more than I used to, feeling like I could control the outcomes that I can get and maneuver this world in a way that I wanted to. And that third level of behavior change is identity. Now, what this identity means is it's simply how you view yourself. Every day, all of the time, we have thoughts going through our head. Just like we're writing a story. Imagine you're reading a book. You hear the narrator describe what's going on in that world. We have that in our head. Our brain is constantly narrating to us what's going on in the world. What does that mean? How do I view that? And most importantly, how do I view myself? So your identity is simply the way that you view yourself. And when you learn to shift this, powerful things happen. Because if you focus on outcome-based goals, or even if you focus on systems-based goals, often if your identity doesn't align with that, you will self-sabotage. And let me explain why that happens. Our body does everything it can to act in alignment with our identity. If your body thinks that you're not the kind of person that takes risks, if you try and take a risk, your body's going to really resist that urge. It's just within our nature. We want to preserve who we are. We don't like people telling us that we're something, that we don't view that in ourselves. It causes discrepancy. It causes incongruence in the way that we view ourselves. Which means that if you set goals but your identity doesn't align with them, what's actually going to happen is over time, your brain is going to self-sabotage with that thing. If you find yourself in a relationship and you don't feel like you deserve your partner, your brain is going to self-sabotage you because it thinks that it's inevitable. It thinks that the breakup's going to happen inevitably because it's not in alignment with your identity. So when you can learn to shift your identity into a positive thing, instead of setting New Year's resolutions, you learn to shift your identity, which again, I'll get onto in just a second. That's when true behavior change can happen over the long run. Because when your identity says that you're the kind of person that goes to the gym regularly, then your brain is going to act on you to do that. It's no longer going to feel like it's a struggle. If you've ever gone for multiple weeks doing a new habit and then you failed, it's probably because your identity wasn't aligned with that thing, so your brain is going to make it very difficult for you to do that thing. So let's get on to the framework on how you can actually change that identity. This is a framework that I talk about in the procrastination program, which is a full framework, but let me just give you a quick summary now, because this is super powerful. First of all, you've got to define the end state. This means what do I want to achieve in the long run? What do I want my day to look like in the long run? You sit down and you really ponder that question. What kind of things do I want to have? All of those things. Then you define where you are now and the things that you have now. Once you've done that, you've got where you are now and where you want to become. You need to define the kind of person that would easily achieve the kind of things that you want to achieve. I believe that in general, this world works in a way that you get the things that you deserve to get, which means the kind of person you are now reflects in the kind of things that you have now and the world around you in general, which means that the things that you want to achieve, the goals you want to achieve, will only happen once you become the kind of person that deserves getting those things. So instead of focus on things and things, environment and environment, we focus on who you are now and who you want to become. Once you've got a clearly defined idea of who you are now and who you want to become, the next step is about going about the process of transforming yourself. Constantly asking yourself, what would the version of myself that I want to become do in this certain circumstance? And if you can repeatedly act a little bit more like the kind of person that you want to become, over time you're going to transform. Literally, your identity is not static. You are not some fixed person. You will transform from who you are now into who you want to become. And when you become the kind of person you want to become, you get the kind of things that you want to get. Make sense? And although this may sound like it's all airy-fairy, it does sound a little bit illogical. And trust me, I hate things that are illogical. If I can't see a logical explanation for things, I'm just not going to do it. But having personally gone about the process of defining who I am now, defining who I want to become, and then going about the process of transforming myself into that kind of person, that's worked far better for me than setting goals. It's worked far better than me for setting processes. And although all of those things are important, and although all of those things are really, really beneficial, nothing's worked quite as well as defining the kind of person I want to become, and then transforming myself into that person. And you even see Stoicism talking about this all of the time. They have this concept called contemplation of the sage. For them, if I remember correctly, they would use Zeno. They would always ask themselves, what would Zeno do? Just like the Christians ask themselves, what would Jesus do? I'm saying that you create your own version of yourself. So instead of comparing yourself to other people, you just compare yourself to the best version of yourself, and you make the transformation into becoming that kind of person. So if you've got this far in the video, what I want you to do is go down and leave me comments down below. The only reason I'm asking this is because we're testing a lot of things on this channel, and I really need your feedback to let me know which direction you think I should take it in.